Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. Hey, what's up, fellow chicken keepers? Thank you for joining me again. Today, we are taking on the big question, the one that's on every chicken keeper's mind from the day those chicks hatch, right up till the first time they finally lay an egg, or let out that crow that means they won't be contributing to your egg basket. Is it a hen or a rooster? If you've ever posted a picture of one of your young chickens, just hoping that someone out there would see some clue, some sign that could tell you that that little bird would eventually grow up to be another productive member of your egg-laying army, then you almost certainly got a ton of answers with something close to a 50-50 split, leaving you right where you started, right where most of us are a couple of months in after hatching some eggs or bringing home a basket of straight-run chicks, completely lost, and left to wait a little bit longer to see if that little chick is going to start waking you up with a crow or with a breakfast nugget. Well, today, we're going to sort through some of the different methods we can use at home for making that call. From old wives' tales that seem to border on witchcraft, to modern methods with guaranteed results. We'll look at all of them to see if there's anything we could do to solve the mystery. Starting with some of the more obscure and unproven ways people were trying this in the past. These tricks are probably no better than the mixed bag of answers you get from social media, but it is kind of interesting to see what people were trying, and funny to know that chicken keepers have been struggling with the same questions we are now for a very long time. The first one is that the shape of an egg can predict the sex of the chicken side, as in pointed eggs are boys and the round ones are girls. This one is definitely a myth. And yet somehow, it was one of the first ones I found years back when I first bought an incubator. I don't think I was ever able to keep track of what chick popped out of which egg anyways, but I was pretty sure this method was bogus. The chick's sex is determined right when the egg is fertilized, meaning that the old tale of fluctuating temperatures in your incubator also won't make a difference. When a rooster does his thing, he shares the ZZ chromosomes, which is the male chromosome in birds. Once that makes it to the egg, it's all about what chromosome that egg is carrying. Could be Z, could be W. And that's what determines hen or rooster. Not the temperature, not the weight of the egg. Then there's the pendulum trick, swinging a weight over a little baby chick and seeing which way it moves. Supposedly, you hold that weight on one end of a string over a chick or even a developing egg. And if it starts to swing in a circle, you've got a hen. If it swings back and forth, it's a rooster. Now, I could imagine somebody doing this and maybe getting lucky, correctly predicting the sex of a few chicks, but unfortunately, it's just not that easy. And this method is about as real as the moon landing. Could be a fun game, though, if you're throwing a chicken-themed party, but don't count on it to correctly sex your chicks. And then you might as well try the water divining method, too. That old trick where you walk around with a couple of sticks and when you walk over water down in the ground, the sticks cross each other. I've heard it actually does work for finding water, but not so much for chicks. And then there's that old saying that the bolder ones are always boys. Just like the other tricks, this one's going to be right from time to time. I mean, you've got a 50-50 chance with any of them. But some of my sassiest chicks just turned out to be hens who didn't take any nonsense. Personality is a clue, and we'll get more into that, but it's not the final word. Now, getting into the more tried and true methods, the first one we'll hit on is wing feather sexing. This one's pretty cool because it works in those first couple of days after hatching. From what I've read on it, you want to use this in that first 2 to 4 days of their life. That's when those wing feathers are just starting to develop. Couple of things to note on this one. It doesn't work for all breeds. Heritage breeds are typically not going to show some of the same differences there, and especially to the untrained eye. But a lot more of the modern crossbreeds were actually bred with this in mind, like your Leghorns, different Rhode Island hybrids, Isa Browns. So it's not going to be a solution for all the chicks you might get. Also, if you try this, you got to be really careful doing it. Those little wings are super fragile, and you know the chicks are going to fight you on it. So just be sure to treat them delicately when you're spreading those wings out. So wing feather sexing is based on this very slight difference in those developing feathers. You take your little chick and stretch one of their wings out, just enough to fan out those little feathers. And in female chicks, the primary wing feathers are longer and more defined than the covert feathers, which are the little ones that kind of overlap the primaries. But with the males, the feathers are usually shorter and more uniform across the wing. It's really subtle, but if you look closely and you've got a breed that grows like this, you will see that there's a difference in how those feathers develop early on. Hatcheries will often use this with sex-linked breeds, where parents are bred specifically to make this work. But if you're hatching your own eggs from a mixed flock, say your Barred Rock Hen and Rhode Island Rooster, this is only going to be as good as your best guess without looking at the feather growth anyways. I tried it last year after I had seen some people talking about it. I just brought home this group of mixed chicks that hatched at my kids' school, and I had provided the eggs, so eventually those chicks had to come back home with me after the kids watched a match, and it didn't work at all for me. I didn't even know that it only worked with certain breeds, and I was so worried about hurting one of them that I never really felt like I made a good evaluation anyways. So if you're ordering chicks from a hatchery and they mention that they're feather sexable, go ahead and give this a try. It's always fun to guess. Otherwise, you may need to go with other options. The next one being vent sexing. Now, this method is where the backyard hobbyists like us could be in over our heads. If you've ever wondered how those big hatcheries churn out thousands of chicks and still manage to send you a box labeled as all pullets, well, this is how they do it. It happens right after hatching, usually within the first day, and it involves gently pressing the chick's vent to check for a tiny reproductive bump that signals male or female. Now, before you grab your magnifying glass and start practicing this on your latest batch of chicks, you should know that this really isn't something the average chicken keeper should try at home. I've watched a bunch of the videos on it, and it was kind of intimidating. I never felt like this is something just easy to pick up and start doing successfully, and hatchery workers go through a lot of training to get it right. And even then, their accuracy still isn't going to be perfect. And that's why every year, a bunch of us who think we came home with a box full of pullets end up with a rooster or two that we hadn't planned on. The process involves holding the chick in just the right position, putting the tiniest bit of pressure on that vent area, and then spotting a little bump or the lack of a bump that indicates male or female. If you don't have the steady hands and perfect touch that it takes for this, it's really easy to hurt that little chick or just be wrong about what you've seen. I'll admit, I was curious enough to watch some videos online, and it is wild to see how fast and confident those pros are. They can evaluate a chick in just a few seconds and manage to be right most of the time. But I don't feel comfortable doing this myself. It's just too easy to hurt the chicks if you do it wrong. And the signs of what you're looking for are so subtle that I'm not sure I'd trust myself to get it right anyways. It's definitely something that can be learned, and if you hatch a lot of chicks at home, maybe it'd be worth the time to get trained on it. But for me, I'm leaving this one to the pros. Now, if you like shortcuts and aren't super picky about what kind of chickens you own as long as they lay eggs, then autosexing breeds might be the way to go. No guessing, no examining tiny feathers under a magnifying glass or pushing on vents. Autosexing breeds are specially developed so that males and females look different right from the day they hatch. Breeders have spent years perfecting these lines to make them easily identifiable as boys or girls. And because of that, they've become some of the most popular breeds for backyard chicken keepers. That list includes cream leg bars, who are super popular for their beautiful blue eggs, Rhode Island Reds, not on my list of favorites, but they are one of the more popular breeds for backyard flocks. Also, Plymouth Rocks and Well bars are autosexable, and there's a few less popular breeds as well, but definitely enough variety to put together a nice mixed flock of chickens without worrying about any roosters that you wouldn't be able to keep. Okay, fast forward a little bit to when your chicks are starting to look a little less like fluff balls and more like little chickens. Right around 4 to 6 weeks for most of the breeds. That's when you might start noticing some differences in their combs and wattles, and for a lot of breeds, this is when the boys really start to develop. Cockerels often develop larger, redder combs and wattles earlier than the pullets do, but how obvious that is depends a lot on that specific breed. Take leghorns, for example, the boys can develop pretty early, and by just 5 or 6 weeks in, that comb can start looking pretty full, while the girls, on the other hand, at that age just aren't that far along, and their combs will still be fairly small and pale. But if you've got cochins or silkies, you could be waiting a lot longer to start to see any noticeable difference on top of their heads. The combs can stay small well past 6 or even 10 or 12 weeks. I usually start to notice a difference in the way they stand and walk around way before I see a difference in their combs. So it's not a foolproof method, and some pullets can throw you off with bigger combs, but it's a pretty good clue to keep an eye on as your chicks hit that next stage of development. By the time your chick hits 10 or 12 weeks, the signs do start to get a little clearer. This is the point where a lot of breeds start to show off their sex-specific feathers, and those are one of the most reliable visual clues you're going to get, short of seeing a new egg in the basket. Here's what to watch for if you've got a suspected rooster on your hands. First, check the hackle feathers. In cockerels, they grow longer, pointed, and pretty shiny, kind of like a masculine chicken scarf that they use to attract the ladies. Next, you want to look at the saddle feathers. Roosters get those curved, glossy feathers that let everyone know he's a big, fancy boy. And then you want to look at the sickle feathers in the tail. Those dramatic, arched plumes that give roosters their unmistakable silhouette. Pullet feathers, on the other hand, are a little more understated. Usually rounded, more of a matte sheen to them. You don't see those big pronounced hackle feathers, and their tails are going to be a little less extravagant. And once you know what to look for, it really sticks out when compared side to side. This method takes a little patience, but once those feathers come in, it's usually a dead giveaway, with the exception again being silkies. It's a little harder to see those differences in those areas until quite a bit later, usually. But those streamers coming off their head will start to develop, and for me, those are usually the first thing I notice. You'll see those other little differences too, it just takes a little longer to develop. But keep an eye out, and before you know it, you'll be spotting your roosters and pullets with confidence in no time. Okay, now let's say you're really impatient, or maybe you've got a special little chick that you just can't wait to figure out. If you want to be totally sure and don't mind spending a few bucks, DNA sexing is your high-tech solution. All you got to do is send in a small sample, usually a couple feathers or a little drop of blood, to a lab that specializes in DNA poultry testing. There's companies out there that do this for your backyard chicken keepers, and they'll analyze the sample and tell you within, they say 99% accuracy, whether you've got a cockerel or a pullet. I don't know that I'd go spend the $25 or so that it costs just for any chick that I hatched at home, but if you breed rare birds, or maybe you're trying to select a breeding pair that you're going to keep out of a clutch of chicks, this can be a pretty easy way to get it figured out. I've never done it myself, mostly because I'm too cheap and too stubborn to admit that I can't guess it on my own. But if you're curious, just search poultry DNA testing. There's a bunch of these places out there that can do it for you. You can even buy a kit for doing this at home, but I'm not sure how good you have to be at doing lab work to pull this off. I do know a couple of breeders local to me that got into it, and now they're able to sell sex chicks of all different breeds. Just don't expect your chicks to thank you for plucking out a couple feathers. Okay, last one I want to talk about is actually my preferred way of trying to ID the sex of a chicken. And in my opinion, it's the most entertaining. The downside is it takes a lot of time. But if you like watching your chicks grow up anyways, and watching those little personalities develop, this is a great way to make the most of that time. Cockerels will tend to reveal themselves with some of those classic rooster moves pretty early on. In my experience, it's usually been once I move them from a brooder to a larger space where they can really start acting like chickens. By 6 or 7 weeks, you might see them standing a little taller, puffing out their chests or even bumping into each other as they start to work out the pecking order. And even though these signs can be shown by males or females, you'll start to see a pattern develop with the boys. By 6 or 7 weeks, you'll start to notice a slight difference in their size as the boys are outpacing the girls a little bit, and notice that those bigger chicks are usually a little bit more dominant than the smaller ones. But the most reliable clue that I've picked up on is seeing a young cockerel start to take lead of his little flock. I remember the exact moment I first saw it, or at least noticed it for the first time. I had 7 new silky chicks that we had hatched out at home, and by the time they were about 5 or 6 weeks old, I had moved them out of a brooder into a large grow-out pen that we turned one of our barn stalls into. I was going in to check on them before closing everything up for the night, and when I went in and opened up that stall door, I saw that they were all huddled up in that classic silky fashion, just a big pile of fluff. But 2 of them stood up, and they kind of placed themselves in a guard position, putting themselves between me and the other chicks. I remember seeing that, and I was kind of amazed at these young little birds that just instinctually were ready to stand up to me and keep the other ones safe. At least that's what it looked like. But I remember that exact moment, thinking to myself, like, those are roosters, for sure. And the more I watched them over those next couple of weeks, the more I saw them acting just like the big boys do. Then you start to notice kind of who's keeping their head up a little bit longer when there's signs of trouble. That's almost always the rooster in a grown flock of chickens. Hens will go back to pecking and scratching around once they feel safe, but the roosters will stay on guard just a little bit longer. I mean, it's not a perfect science, and with that little group of silkies I just mentioned, I was right about the 2 boys I had spotted. But there was another one in there, a late bloomer, I guess, that I didn't notice. And that's going to happen. Not every rooster is going to be real dominant, and not every hen is going to be so submissive. But over time, patterns do emerge. And if you take mental notes about those little quirks they start to show, it starts to tell a story of who's who. For most of us at home, keeping an eye on comb growth, feather shapes, those telltale personality quirks is a great place to start. And hey, even if you guess wrong, well, that's part of the fun of raising chickens. Every flock is full of fun stories and unique experiences that make them special to us. Whether it's a surprise rooster who ends up being your best feathered buddy, or a late-to-bloom pullet who finally dropped an egg when you least expected it. It's all part of the adventure. And it makes it kind of fun when you tell the story to somebody about why your big grumpy rooster is named Princess. I hope you guys find something in there that helps you figure out your chicks this year. Thank you again for listening. Always appreciate it. You guys have a great week, and I'll talk to you again soon.